Hello, this is going to be my fighter build video. It's going to be more of an update video rather than a full walkthrough of what I'm currently using. So it's pretty much going to be what I have changed from last mod to this mod. So I'll start with the gear as usual. I have updated my helmet and my gloves and my weapons and some of the stuff on the right side, but I'll start with the helmet. This one of course comes from the new Master Moon Dancer trial. I use it as a high item level piece, not so much for the bonus that it gives. It's just a little bit extra since it has a maximum of 66% uptime, but it's mostly for the high item level since the next best thing to use would be either the Manticore helmet or the Enchanted Brigand one, but it's 650 more item levels, so that's the main reason why I have started to use that. Helmet or chestplate's the same. Our gloves is pretty much the same thing. It's because it's higher item level. It's 600, 700 more item level than the previous mod stuff. Obviously you can go with the Drow Priest stuff for extra debuff, but that's 800 less item level, so I feel it warrants it, so that's the reason why I have started to go with these two pieces for the higher item level. Because both of those together is almost 2,000 extra item level over the previous stuff. Our weapons, we're using the new mythic ones that come from the new trial. The reason why is because their bonus is just too good not to use. It gives 12% damage mitigation in the new trial, which is very needed for a fighter because the fighter doesn't get as much self-mitigation as the other two tanks, so it really helps with surviving the tank busters. It's 6% everywhere else, which is going to be better than the 2% that you would get from Masterwork, and I just cannot warrant using Masterwork anymore because of how strong these weapons are for support, and most people share that same sentiment, so if people are going to yell at you for not using 2% extra damage Masterwork weapons, then they can go screw themselves. Like, I don't think it really matters. Boots, we're still using the same. I have changed my neck and waist bonus. Instead of using the dragon set, I have used the new higher item level broken set, which gives 6 con in the necklace, and it's only 3 con in the waist, and I'll explain the reason why I did that. So this waist you can buy from the campaign store, maybe the second week. I'll go in the campaign real quick. It's the draining sash. So you can buy it essentially for free. It's the 4th milestone actually. And the other option to use in the waist slot for high con is the Dark Lake sash, which I'll show. Dark Lake sash, the regular version is 1.1 million, and the +1 is 1.5 million. And this gives a little bit less item level. It was 550 less item level, and it gives about the same stats. But and it also gives 6 con. So this technically would give you more hit points than what I'm using, but I can't warrant the spending extra money for that, so I went with the free option essentially. And that's what I would recommend other people to do. The necklace, this one comes from the advanced and the master version of the trial. It's of course the 6 con version of the necklace. It's the highest item level thing you can get with 6 con. For my single target loadout, I am using this ring for extra threat. It really helps in Master Demon Web Pits, especially the 2nd and 3rd boss. Even though the fighter has the KV, I just feel like this is good for ensuring that you never lose aggro and DPS never die. So that's the reason why I went with that. It's not necessarily needed, especially with the tank reworks this mod, but it's just what I've started to use. So our other ring, I used this ring on single target and AoE loadout just because of the passive increase of threat that it got from the threat rework. It's essentially 3 times better than it was last mod, because the base threat of tanks was increased by 3 times. So this is actually stronger threat than just using your at-will, by far. So it's good for the initial threat at the beginning, when DPS first go in and use their encounters and everything, before you pop artifacts. It's good to proc that a little bit in the beginning. I am using the new shirt. This comes from the master version of the trial. Actually, the master and the advanced version. It's just a little bit extra self-healing, and it has a pretty good proc uptime, since it's a 10% chance every 5 seconds. I think I was using these in the last build, but you can just buy these on the auction house, or if they're not on the auction house, you can still buy them with seals. They give 5% power and defense when one teammate is 30 feet or further away. I don't necessarily need it, but it helps with higher uptime on that defense, so it's really nice to have. Same artifacts and stuff. The only thing I changed was, since I don't have a set bonus anymore, I can slot in another 15% stamina regain artifact, since I don't have to use the blue dragon mark anymore. Let's look at enchantments. I have switched stuff around a little bit for stats. My single target loadout, I am using the mythic stamina bonus now, since I have extra movement speed. I don't need the movement speed bonus on single target early anymore, so I have started to use that. This is a moonstone. It's one of the new enchantments. I have a few of these new enchantments that I have started to play around with, but you can use citrons or you can use cobalts here. It's kind of either or. They're just kind of filler enchantments more than anything. You can see our stats. I'm not buffed up right now, but the buffs that I use are Chain of Scales still, and then I use Caprice, Crafted Potion of Deflect, 4 rank or +1, and Faux Hammer. And then you can also use Sambocade for the 20,000 extra hit points and a little bit extra movement speed. So my hit points standing is almost 1.6 mil by myself. With a group with 5 VIPs, it's around 1.65 mil. And then if my Master Boon is procced, which I'll go over in a second, that puts me up over 1.7 million hit points. If I just stand in here, you can so with 5 VIPs, I'll be over 1.7 million hit points with that Master Boon procced, which I'll show in a second. Our stats, we easily get to 90% defense. That's with the Master Boon and with Fortified Nature proccing like 1 or 2 stacks. Awareness gets up to 90 pretty easily as well. 1 or 2 fortified stacks, the helmet, and these arms all can proc it up to 90 very easily. Our crit avoidance is 0.5% off, but I think I'll live with that. Our deflect and deflect severity have dropped considerably since the last build, but since my HP is about 200k higher than it was before, I feel it's a good trade-off, honestly. And the lower item level of the Dragon Hunt set has just kind of made me feel that it's better to use the higher item level. Alright, so let me go over Master Boons now. So I have, since the Master Boons got reworked and buffed, I have switched some stuff up. So I am using, of course, all the defensive boons, movement speed. I am using this one as a kind of a extra thing that I didn't have anything else to put it in. We're using Forte and Stamina Regen. And then for the Master Boons, I am using 4 of them. There aren't really any other Master Boons I would worry about getting outside of these 4. But we have Death's Bulwark. This is the one that gives you the stats, and it also gives you temporary hit points when you take more than 50% of your maximum hit points in a single blow. Focus Retaliation still. This gives the 6% deflect and deflect severity on encounter use. 5% chance on at will, so that's a little bit extra self-healing as well. It reduces the damage of the next attack on you by 10%, so it's just a little bit extra. And Blessed Resilience, this is the one that gives you the extra maximum hit points. You get, what is that, 6% maximum hit points for 10 seconds. And it also gives that 6% defense and heals stamina by, what is that, 4% plus 2%, so that's 10% stamina back over 10 seconds. If I had extra boon points, I would probably just go into action point gain and maybe recharge speed. These two don't really do much for a tank though, so they're just kind of if you have the points to spare. And you might even feel the need to go for this one as well. Blessed Advantage, that gives recharge speed and power and a heal over time. I believe that procs to yourself. Guild Stronghold, we're using Res Sickness in the single target loadout. Everything else is just based off of stats. Companions, we're using all the same stuff, except we are, so Moonshade Druid and Utility. Except we are using the new companion gear. This comes from the new campaign store. It takes the second week milestone to buy it. So it's just all the full defense awareness gear. Armor Break, Tutor, Renegora, Swarm. All of this is pretty much exactly the same. I don't think I really changed anything. All the collars and everything. I'll just scroll through quickly. Now I will go over my powers. So I have switched this up considerably. I am using, of course, Brazen Slash as my primary at-will, and Tide of Iron now since it got buffed. This makes it to where when you use Tide of Iron, you gain 500% increased threat for 5 seconds. And there's also the added effect from one of the feats where you deal additional physical damage whenever an attack strikes multiple enemies. And that also procs on Enforced Threat, interestingly enough. So our encounters, we are using Enforced Threat. We have switched Shield Throw out for Iron Warrior or maybe Knight's Challenge. It's kind of situational, but 9 times out of 10 I'm just using Iron Warrior. I even use it in my AoE loadout. And then Knight's Valor we're still using, of course. We're always using Second Wind. The second one, or the second daily, depends on what you're running. So either Phalanx or Determination. It's just situational. I'm always using these two class features. I'm now using Greater Endurance and Steel Recovery still. I switched off of Combat Superiority because I just don't feel it's much needed anymore, so I've just switched that over to extra movement speed. It's the reason why I'm now using the stamina bonus enchantment. So we're using, instead of shield thrower feat, we're using staying power. We're using this for the extra physical damage, and then everything else is the same as it was last mod. It's pretty much this first feat that we've changed over. That pretty much allows you to gain an extra encounter slot because you don't have to use shield throw anymore. Enforced Threat pretty much takes the place of shield throw, if that makes sense, because it gives you 500% increased threat for 10 seconds when you use Enforced Threat with this staying power feat. So if you stack Enforced Threat and Tide of Iron on top of each other, that gives you an extra 1000% increased threat, plus the base increased threat of 1500%. That's 2500% increased threat with both of them used simultaneously. I'll go ahead and show my AoE loadout and see what we switch in there. I do switch this ring out over to the Topaz ring just because it's a little bit extra and I don't need the Manticore ring in AoE, so it makes sense. Everything else is pretty much the same. Enchantments I do switch around a little bit. That's a Moonstone, that's an Opal. I used the movement speed bonus. And then where all of this is exactly the same. I still use Iron Warrior in AoE because the aggro ring is just too strong. You don't really need Line Breaker for AoE threats, so I just keep on Iron Warrior for the big groups of enemies and stuff where I might need it. Determination or Phalanx, whatever you need. I just use determination because sometimes there's groups where you might need it. All the feats and everything are exactly the same. I do use movement speed on my AoE loadout, of course. All the boons are exactly the same. Companions, we'll use the tutor still. All of this is exactly the same, I don't change anything. And this is pretty much exactly the same. Now I will show I do have a third loadout, which is MGR, in case you were interested in it. What I use on this loadout differently is of course I do use different like enchantments and stuff. I still use the Manticore ring, but I use the top feat instead. I go back to shield thrower with shield throw. Tide of Iron, or not Tide of Iron, Iron Warrior is not really needed in MGR, so in order to help with threat on multiple enemies, like for example the mini bosses in the first phase and the 4 beholders in the 4th and 6th phase, shield throw is very nice for that because it has a 5-second cooldown. Everything else is exactly the same. Movement speed, steal recovery. I do use the movement speed enchantment just because it helps with getting around in MGR. This stuff is exactly the same, and the companion, of course, based off of what your team needs you to run. Runic Aura, T-Rex, blah blah blah, all of this is pretty much the same. So now, let me go to single target real quick. I will show my rotation nowadays for bosses. So I start off with Tide of Iron, and then I run in circles a little bit and proc my Dragon Fire, Tide of Iron again for the 5 seconds. And then when we pop artifacts, I do Artifact, Mount, Enforce Threat, KV, and proc Retaliate with your Tide of Iron up, and then Manticore. Make sure to use your Manticore during the artifact call so that you get the most benefit out of it. And also try to have Tide of Iron and, if possible, Enforce Threat up whenever you proc your Manticore and your Retaliate. If you have both of them up, then that will allow you to get that 2005% increased threat on Retaliate. And you can also cancel the animation of Tide of Iron a little bit. It's like a half second. And you can see the Tide of Iron up there. And you can refresh the duration on Tide of Iron if you use it before it runs out. It refreshes the duration, so you don't have to worry about counting down 5 seconds before you use it again. You can use it about every 4 to 5 seconds if you want. So that's pretty much the gist of it. Of course, if you don't need the Manticore, then you don't have to use the Manticore ring. It's just kind of another option, and you don't really need your daily for much. It just decreases your stats a little bit, but it ensures your threat is going to be much stronger if you do that. So that's pretty much it. I think that's about all there is to it that I've changed. So I hope this helped, and make sure if you don't understand some of the stuff, make sure you go and watch my previous build that I made like a month or so ago, because that will explain stuff in a lot more detail than what I went over in this video, just because I didn't want to make this one too long, since I didn't really change all that much stuff on my build. So I hope this helped, and thanks for watching.